I stood in the gallery, wearing a tuxedo I couldn't have afforded 2 years ago, champagne in hand, surrounded by Manhattan's elite, celebrating my firm's biggest architectural victory. The Pierce Innovation Hub had just won the International Design Excellence Award, and my name was third on the plaque. Not bad for someone who'd been sleeping on a friend's couch in Chicago 18 months earlier, professionally destroyed and emotionally gutted. The crowd parted near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and that's when I saw her, Sophia Chen. She wore emerald green, her dark hair swept up in a way that showed the curve of her neck, and she was laughing at something a silver-haired investor was saying. She hadn't seen me yet. My heart did that stupid thing it had been doing for 6 years, the lurch, the skip, the quiet devastation of her. And then her eyes found mine across the room. The smile faltered, just for a second. Then she recovered with the grace she'd always had, excusing herself from her conversation and walking toward me with deliberate steps. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because the last time I'd seen Sophia Chen was in a Seattle coffee shop 17 months ago, where she told me she was engaged to someone else. Again.
Welcome to Modern Love Diaries, a place for stories about love, connection, and everything in between. This is one of those stories, and to understand why seeing Sophia in that gallery felt like both a gift and a wound, I need to take you back 6 years, to a rainy Tuesday in Boston, when everything quietly changed. I was 26, freshly promoted to junior architect at Morrison & Wells, working 70-hour weeks designing uninspired office parks. My life was a blur of CAD drawings, client meetings, and pretending I was satisfied with safe, profitable mediocrity. That Tuesday, I ducked into a cramped bookstore near Copley Square to escape the rain, water dripping from my jacket onto the worn hardwood floors. That's when I first saw her. She stood in the poetry section, completely absorbed in a slim volume, her finger tracing the lines as she read. Dark jeans, oversized gray sweater, canvas sneakers with hand-drawn doodles on the rubber edges. She had this way of existing in her own world, like she'd created a pocket of silence in the chaos. I watched her for maybe 30 seconds, not in a creepy way, just captivated by someone who seemed so genuinely present in a moment. She looked up, caught me staring, and smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one, with a little head tilt that said, "Hi, I see you too." I should have walked over, should have said literally anything. Instead, I smiled back like an idiot, and my phone buzzed with an urgent message from my boss. By the time I looked up again, she was gone. I spent 20 minutes searching the store, but she'd vanished into the rain-soaked streets of Boston. I told myself it didn't matter. Boston was a big city. People passed each other all the time. But I thought about her for weeks. 3 months later, I was in Chicago for a conference, sitting alone at a hotel bar reviewing presentation notes when I heard a laugh, bright and unguarded, from the other end of the room. I looked up, and there she was. Same woman, same canvas sneakers, though these had different doodles. She was with a group of colleagues, animated and gesturing as she told a story. My brain went into overdrive. What were the odds? Boston and Chicago, different cities, different contexts. I stood up, gathering my courage, planning exactly what I'd say. Something clever about fate, something charming. Then a guy in an expensive suit slid into the seat next to her, kissed her temple, and she leaned into him with easy familiarity. Boyfriend, maybe fiancé. The gold band on her left hand caught the light. I sat back down, feeling ridiculous. The universe wasn't sending me signs. I was just a guy with an overactive imagination and terrible timing. I finished my drink and went back to my room. 6 months after that, I transferred to our Seattle office. Fresh start, better projects, proximity to the mountains I loved. I'd been dating someone casually, Emma, a graphic designer with a sharp wit and zero interest in anything serious, which suited me fine. I was walking through Pike Place Market on a Saturday morning, Emma beside me, complaining about the tourist crowds, when I saw her again. She was at a flower stall, carefully selecting dahlias, her focus absolute. No ring time, I noticed because I looked. I froze mid-step. Emma kept walking, didn't notice. This time, I was going to do it. I was going to walk over, say something, anything, acknowledge this bizarre cosmic coincidence. I took exactly 3 steps in her direction when Emma called back to me, impatient. "Daniel, come on, we're going to be late for brunch." I hesitated. The woman, I still didn't know her name, looked up at the sound, her eyes scanning the crowd. For a second, I thought our gazes would meet again, but Emma grabbed my arm, pulling me along, and the moment dissolved. By the time I extricated myself and circled back, she was gone, again. That night, I broke things off with Emma. Not because of the flower market woman, that would have been insane, but because I realized I was sleepwalking through my life, accepting comfortable and easy instead of pursuing anything that made my heart actually race. Emma took it well. We weren't in love. We both knew it.
I threw myself into work. At 28, I was gaining recognition for innovative, sustainable design. I led the renovation of a historic Seattle theater, won a regional award, started teaching an evening class at the university. I dated occasionally, a museum curator for 4 months, a journalist for 6 weeks, but nothing stuck. And then, on a random Thursday evening, I walked into a lecture hall for an interdisciplinary panel on design and social impact, and she was on the stage. I literally stopped in the doorway, causing a minor traffic jam. Her name, according to the program I grabbed with shaking hands, was Sophia Chen. She was a social impact strategist, age 30, who consulted with nonprofits and corporations on community-centered development. She was eloquent, passionate, funny. When she spoke about the importance of designing spaces that honored the people who'd use them, I felt like she was describing the architecture I dreamed about but rarely got to build. After the panel, there was a networking reception. I downed a glass of cheap wine for courage and approached her while she was examining the hors d'oeuvres table with suspicion. "The cheese is safer than it looks," I said, my opening line an absolute disaster. She turned, and up close she was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, a slight scar through her left eyebrow. She laughed. "That's either very reassuring or deeply concerning." "I'm Daniel," I said, extending my hand like a Victorian gentleman. "I really appreciated your comments about participatory design." "Sophia," she replied, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "You're an architect." "How'd you know?" "You have that look, like you're mentally redesigning this room while we speak." She wasn't wrong. We talked for 45 minutes. She was brilliant, challenging, curious. She asked me about my work, actually listened to my answers, pushed back on my assumptions. I learned she'd grown up in Portland, studied urban planning at Berkeley, worked briefly in San Francisco before moving to Seattle 8 months ago. 8 months. She'd been in my city for 8 months, and we'd never crossed paths until tonight. I was about to ask if she wanted to grab coffee sometime when a tall woman with short platinum hair appeared at Sophia's elbow. "Hey, babe, you ready? We have that early reservation." Sophia's face softened in a way that made my stomach drop. "Yeah, just finishing up." She turned back to me, oblivious to my internal collapse. "This was great, Daniel. Here," she handed me a business card. "If you ever want to collaborate on a project, reach out." I took the card, nodded like a professional, watched her leave with the platinum-haired woman whose hand found the small of Sophia's back with practiced ease. I stood in that reception hall for another 30 minutes, nursing warm wine, staring at her card. Of course she was taken. Of course the universe would let me finally meet her, finally learn her name, finally confirm that the connection I felt was real and mutual and electric, only to remind me that timing was everything, and mine was perpetually, catastrophically wrong. But I kept the card. 2 months later, I used it. Not for romantic reasons. I'd accepted that ship had sailed.
but because I was designing a community center in a low-income neighborhood, and I needed someone who actually understood community needs, not just architectural theory. I sent her a professional email. She responded within hours. We met for coffee to discuss the project. It was torture and joy in equal measure. She was dating someone, the platinum-haired woman, whose name was Vanessa, a professor of environmental science. They'd been together 10 months. Sophia mentioned her casually, the way people do when a relationship is solid and assumed. I was carefully, deliberately single. We worked together for 3 months. The project was beautiful, a space designed with the community, not just for them. Sophia facilitated meetings with residents, translated their needs into design language I could use. We spent long evenings in coffee shops reviewing plans, debating aesthetics versus function, laughing over bad sketches. I fell in love with her. Completely. Quietly. Hopelessly. I never said a word. The project finished. We celebrated with the community at the ribbon cutting. Sophia hugged me goodbye, said we should definitely work together again, and I nodded and smiled and died a little inside. I didn't see her for 8 months.
During those months, I got serious with someone. Rachel was a high school art teacher, kind and stable and absolutely nothing like Sophia, which I told myself was healthy. We moved in together after 6 months. She wanted marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs. I wanted to want those things with her. Then my firm sent me to a conference in Portland, Sophia's hometown, on sustainable urban development. I wasn't expecting to see her. The Pacific Northwest design world is small, but not that small. But on the second day, I walked into a breakout session on adaptive reuse, and there she was, in the 3rd row, alone. No Vanessa. No ring. I slid into the seat beside her before I could overthink it. "Fancy meeting you here," I whispered. She startled, then her whole face lit up. "Daniel! Oh my God! I didn't know you were coming to this." She hugged me, quick and warm, and I breathed in her perfume, something with bergamot and cedar. We spent the entire conference together, attended sessions, grabbed meals, walked through Powell's City of Books for 3 hours on the last evening, arguing about architecture books and debating whether Jane Jacobs was a genius or overrated. She said genius. I played devil's advocate just to keep her talking. On the final night, we sat in a hotel lobby bar, the conference winding down around us. She was drinking whiskey neat, I was nursing a beer. "So, where's Vanessa?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Sophia's expression shifted, something sad and resigned. "We broke up 4 months ago." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was the right call. We wanted different things, different timelines." She swirled her whiskey. She wanted to get married next year, move to Amsterdam for her sabbatical. I wasn't ready for either. I should have told her right then. Should have said, "I've been thinking about you for 2 years. I've reorganized my life around not thinking about you. I'm in a relationship that's fine and good and slowly suffocating me because she's not you." Instead, I said, "That's tough. Breakups are hard." She looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding something. Then, "What about you? Are you seeing anyone?" "Yeah," I admitted. "Rachel. We've been together almost a year. She's great." "That's great," Sophia echoed, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. We finished our drinks, said goodnight. I went back to Seattle and tried to forget the way her hand had lingered when we hugged goodbye. Rachel and I broke up 5 weeks later. Not because of Sophia, not directly, but because Rachel deserved someone who loved her completely, and I was realizing I'd spent a year being a good boyfriend to the wrong person. The breakup was messy. She was hurt and angry, and she had every right to be. I moved out, stayed with a friend, felt like garbage. I didn't contact Sophia. What would I say? "Hey, I'm single now, are you?" Like I'd been waiting for her relationship to end? Like I'd torpedoed my own just for a chance? It felt predatory and pathetic. Instead, I focused on work, took on bigger projects, pushed for more innovative designs. My boss, Richard Morrison, started trusting me with high-profile clients. Then, 11 months after Portland, I got assigned to the biggest project of my career, a mixed-use development in San Francisco that would combine affordable housing, retail space, and a public park.
It was a 2-year project, and Morrison wanted me to lead it. There was a catch. I'd need to relocate to San Francisco for at least 18 months. I almost said no. Seattle had become home. But then I thought, why not? There was nothing tying me there. No relationship, no family nearby, just memories of missed chances and bad timing. I accepted, moved to San Francisco 3 weeks later, and found out on my second day in the new office that our primary community liaison for the project was Sophia Chen, who'd relocated from Seattle 6 months earlier for a job with a major foundation. I stared at the project roster, my hands actually shaking. The universe apparently had a twisted sense of humor. Our first project meeting was professional, careful. We shook hands like colleagues, not people who'd spent 3 months building something close to friendship, not people who'd had one perfect evening in Portland that ended with everything unsaid. But working together again was inevitable and intense. We fell into our old rhythm, her brilliant strategic mind, my design instincts, the easy way we challenged and complemented each other. Except this time we were both single. I didn't know if she was dating anyone, didn't ask, kept things strictly professional for 3 months, terrified of misreading signals, of ruining the working relationship, of discovering she'd never felt what I felt. Then, one evening, working late in the office, reviewing community feedback, she said, "Daniel, can I ask you something personal?" I looked up from the site plans. "Sure." "That conference in Portland last year, were you happy with Rachel?" The question caught me completely off guard. I put down my pen. "Why are you asking?" She met my eyes, steady and serious. "Because you seemed sad. And I've thought about that night a lot, about whether I imagined that you seemed sad." I could have deflected, changed the subject. Instead, I told her the truth. "No," I said quietly. "I wasn't happy. I was in a relationship with someone I cared about but didn't love. Not the way you're supposed to love someone you're building a life with." Sophia nodded slowly. "Is that why you broke up?" "Part of it. Mostly because she deserved better than someone who was emotionally somewhere else." "Where were you emotionally?" This was it. The moment. 6 years of missed connections and bad timing and careful professionalism evaporating in a late-night office with no one else around. "Honestly," I said, "I was thinking about a woman I met in a bookstore in Boston who I kept running into in different cities at exactly the wrong times." Sophia's breath caught. "Daniel? I'm not trying to make this weird," I said quickly. "I know we have to work together. I know this project is important. But you asked, and I'm tired of not being honest." She stood up, walked around the table, and sat in the chair next to mine, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "I saw you in that bookstore in Boston. I smiled at you because I thought you looked kind and interesting, and I'd just moved to the city and didn't know anyone. I was going to come talk to you, but then you looked at your phone and seemed busy, so I left." My heart was pounding. "The bar in Chicago? I saw you stand up. Thought you were leaving. By the time I could have introduced myself, you were gone." "The flower market? I heard someone call your name. Daniel. I remembered it from your conference badge in Chicago. I'd noticed you across the room earlier that day. I turned to look, but there were too many people." We'd been circling each other for years, missing each other by minutes, by seconds, by the width of a relationship neither of us should have been in. "This is insane," I said, helplessly. "Completely," she agreed. Then quieter, "I've thought about you for 6 years, Daniel. Every city, every conference, every bookstore. I thought I was losing my mind." I reached for her hand. She let me take it. "So what do we do now?" I asked. She smiled, that real smile, the one from the bookstore. "I think we stop missing each other." I kissed her, finally. 6 years and 4 cities and a dozen missed chances, and I finally kissed Sophia Chen in a sterile office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, and it felt like every right decision I'd never made suddenly clicking into place. We took it slow, painfully, carefully slow. The project was too important to risk with a messy workplace romance. We went on actual dates, dinners, museums, hikes in Marin. We talked about everything. Her childhood in Portland, my family in Ohio, the relationships we'd had and why they'd failed, our fears about finally getting the timing right. She told me about Marcus, the fiancé from Chicago, how they'd wanted different things but kept trying anyway, how she'd finally ended it 2 weeks before the wedding, devastating both families but knowing it would be worse to marry him. I told her about Emma and Rachel and the year I'd spent in therapy figuring out why I kept choosing safety over substance. 3 months into dating, she met my best friend, Lucas, who took me aside and said, "If you mess this up, I'm keeping her in the divorce." 6 months in, I met her parents. Her mother took one look at me and said something in Mandarin to Sophia. Later, Sophia translated. She said, "You look at me the way my father looks at her." The project was going well, better than well. It was going to be a landmark development, a model for ethical urban planning. Sophia's community outreach was transformative. We were building something meaningful together, professionally and personally. And then, 18 months into the project and 14 months into our relationship, everything collapsed. It started with an anonymous tip to a local investigative journalist. Morrison & Wells, my firm, had allegedly been involved in bid rigging on several major city contracts, including ours. The accusation was that Richard Morrison had been paying off city officials to secure projects, inflating budgets and skimming funds. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. By noon, the city had frozen our project. By evening, state and federal investigators had seized firm documents. By the end of the week, Richard Morrison was under criminal investigation, and everyone at the firm, including me, was implicated by association. I hadn't known, hadn't been involved. I'd been so focused on design work that I'd never looked at the financial side, never questioned how we'd won certain bids. But my name was on the project. I was the lead architect. When Morrison & Wells went down, I went down with it. The firm collapsed within 6 weeks. Richard Morrison was indicted. The rest of us were cleared of criminal wrongdoing, but utterly destroyed professionally. My reputation, built over a decade of careful work, was obliterated. No firm would touch me. I'd been too senior at Morrison & Wells, too visibly associated with the scandal. It didn't matter that I'd been exonerated. In architecture, perception was everything. I lost my apartment when my savings ran out. Moved to a studio in the Tenderloin that cost half my unemployment check. Stopped answering calls from former colleagues. Watched my career burn down around me while I sent out resumes that went unanswered. Sophia stood by me through all of it. She never wavered, never suggested I knew or should have known. She was furious on my behalf, helped me find a lawyer, attended meetings with me when I couldn't face them alone. But I was drowning, depressed, ashamed, professionally dead at 33. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. in a panic, convinced I'd destroyed not just my career, but hers by association. She worked for a foundation. She couldn't afford to be connected to a scandal. 3 months after the firm collapsed, I broke up with her. I told her I needed space to figure out my next steps. Told her she deserved someone who wasn't a professional disaster. Told her every rational-sounding lie that disguised the truth. I was terrified she'd eventually realize I was damaged goods and leave anyway, so I was leaving first. She fought me on it, said we'd figure it out together, that she didn't care about my career status, that she loved me, not my job title. But I was a coward. I ended it and stopped taking her calls. 2 weeks later, I left San Francisco, moved to Chicago, where Lucas lived, and slept on his couch for 4 months while I tried to piece together some kind of life from the wreckage. The thing about hitting rock bottom is that it clarifies everything. I spent those months on Lucas's couch doing a lot of therapy, a lot of thinking, and eventually a lot of freelance drafting work for small firms who needed cheap labor and didn't care about pedigree. It was honest work, and slowly, very slowly, I started to rebuild. One day, about 6 months into my Chicago exile, I was working in a coffee shop, drafting plans for someone's kitchen renovation, when a woman sat down across from me uninvited. She was maybe 60, elegant, with steel gray hair and expensive glasses. "Daniel Reeves?" she asked. I looked up, wary. "Yes?" "I'm Catherine Pierce. I own Pierce Development Group. I've been looking for you." I must have looked confused because she smiled slightly. "I'm friends with Sophia Chen. She's mentioned you several times. In fact, she's mentioned you so many times over the past year that I finally looked into your work, your actual work, not the Morrison and Wells disaster." My throat tightened at Sophia's name. "I don't understand." "The Seattle Community Center, the adaptive reuse projects in your portfolio, even the San Francisco development before it was killed, the design work was extraordinary. That wasn't Richard Morrison's vision. That was yours." I didn't know what to say. Catherine leaned forward. "I'm developing a mixed-income residential project in New York. 60 units, rooftop gardens, ground floor commercial, integrated community spaces. I need an architect who actually gives a damn about the people who live there. Sophia said you're that architect." "Sophia said that?" I managed. "She said you're the most talented architect she's ever worked with. She also said you're an idiot who broke up with her because you were scared, but that's none of my business." Catherine slid a business card across the table. "Come to New York. Interview with my team. If it works out, I'll hire you as lead designer. You'll rebuild your reputation, and I'll get a building I'm actually proud of." I stared at the card, my hands shaking. "Why would you take a chance on me?" I asked. "Because Sophia Chen has impeccable judgment about people and projects, and because I've watched too many talented people get destroyed by other people's corruption. You deserve a second chance, Mr. Reeves. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it." I flew to New York 3 days later, met with Catherine's team, developers, financiers, community organizers. They'd done their homework on me. They asked hard questions about Morrison and Wells, about my role, about what I'd learned. I was honest, brutally honest. Said I'd been naive, too focused on design work to pay attention to the financial side. Never questioned how we'd won certain bids. But my name was on the project. I was the lead architect. When Morrison and Wells went down, I went down with it. They hired me. The project was everything Catherine had promised. Challenging, meaningful, the kind of architecture I dreamed about. I moved to New York, found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, and threw myself into the work with the desperation of someone who knew this was my last shot. I wanted to contact Sophia, thank her, apologize, beg her to give me another chance. But I'd burned that bridge, ended things brutally, and then ghosted her for months. She'd moved on, probably met someone else, someone who wasn't a disaster. I focused on the work instead. The Pierce project took 14 months from design to groundbreaking. It was featured in Architectural Digest, won 2 awards, got me noticed by other firms. Catherine introduced me to colleagues, vouched for my integrity, helped me rebuild my professional network. By the time the building was finished, I had 3 other projects lined up. My reputation was recovering. I was sleeping through the night again. I'd even started dating. Nothing serious, just reminding myself I was capable of human connection. But I thought about Sophia constantly, wondered where she was, if she was happy, if she ever thought about me. Then Catherine invited me to a gallery opening in Manhattan, a celebration for the Pierce Innovation Hub, her latest project, which had just won an International Design Award. "You should come, network, celebrate. You've earned it." I almost said no. Networking events made me anxious, and I had early meetings the next day. But Catherine had saved my career. I owed her. So I put on a tuxedo I'd bought for occasions like this, showed up at the gallery, and tried to look like I belonged among Manhattan's elite. And that's when I saw her. Sophia stood near the windows in an emerald dress, laughing at something someone said, and every logical thought in my brain evaporated. I'd spent 17 months trying to move on, telling myself she'd forgotten me, that what we'd had was over. But seeing her again felt like every missed connection and bad decision and careful rationalization crumbling to dust. She turned, our eyes met, and I watched her smile falter. She walked toward me, and I couldn't breathe. "Daniel?" she said when she reached me. Her voice was carefully neutral. "I didn't know you'd be here. Catherine invited me. I'm working with Pierce Development now." "I know," Sophia said. "I recommended you for the job, remember? I never properly thanked you for that. You could have called." The accusation hung between us, deserved and cutting. "I know," I said quietly. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For how I ended things, for disappearing, for being a coward when you deserved honesty." Sophia looked at me for a long moment. "Why are you apologizing now? It's been almost 2 years." "Because seeing you again made me realize I never stopped caring about you. And I owe you the truth, even if it's too late." Her expression softened slightly. "What's the truth, Daniel?" "That I broke up with you because I was terrified. I'd lost everything professionally, and I couldn't stand the idea of you watching me fail. So I failed us instead. And I've regretted it every day since." People moved around us, the gallery buzzing with conversation, but it felt like we were alone. Sophia said, "I was engaged." My heart stopped. "Was?" "I ended it 3 months ago. He was kind, successful, everything I should have wanted. But he wasn't you." Hope flickered, dangerous and bright. "Sophia, I spent a year hating you. A year trying to move on, trying to convince myself that you'd been right to end things, that we'd been doomed by timing anyway. But then I'd see something that reminded me of you. A building, a book, a city at sunset, and I'd realize I was still completely in love with you." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I don't deserve another chance," I said. "I know that. But if you're willing—" "Daniel, I'm scared," she interrupted. "We have this pattern. Right person, wrong time. Always missing each other. What if we mess it up again?" "Then we mess it up together," I said. "But I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if we'd actually tried, really tried, without running when things got hard." Sophia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You hurt me." "I know, and I'll spend as long as it takes proving I won't do it again." She was quiet for a long moment, and I prepared myself for her to say no, to tell me I'd had my chance and wasted it. Instead, she said, "I live in Brooklyn now, Park Slope." "I'm in Prospect Heights." She laughed, shaky and bright. "Of course you are. Of course we'd been living 15 minutes apart this entire time." "The universe has a terrible sense of humor," I agreed. "Or maybe," Sophia said softly, "it's finally getting the timing right." I kissed her in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by strangers and champagne and architectural accolades, and it felt like every missed chance and painful lesson and hard-won second chance converging into this. Us, finally in the same place at the same time, choosing each other with clear eyes and full hearts.
We took it slower the second time. Or maybe we took it faster. It was hard to tell when we'd been circling each other for 6 years. Sophia met me for breakfast the morning after the gallery. We talked for 4 hours, laying everything out. Her fear that I'd run again, my fear that I wasn't enough, the ways we'd both grown and changed in the time apart. "I need you to promise me something," she said over her 3rd cup of coffee. "If you're scared, if you're struggling, if you think you're failing, you talk to me. You don't make unilateral decisions about our relationship because you think you're protecting me. Deal?" "Deal," I agreed. "And you promise to tell me if I'm being an idiot. Don't let me self-sabotage." "Oh, I will absolutely tell you if you're being an idiot." We started dating again officially that week. Dinners, museums,
long walks through Brooklyn. It felt both new and familiar, the ease we'd always had, but deeper now, weighted with everything we'd survived separately and lost together. 3 months in, she met Lucas again. He hugged her and said, "Thank God, he's been insufferable without you." 6 months in, I met her parents again. Her father, who'd never forgiven me for the breakup, made me work for his approval, took me to his garage, made me help him restore a vintage car, asked me detailed questions about my intentions. Finally, covered in grease, he said, "You break her heart again, I break your legs." "That's fair," I replied. He grunted approval. A year into our second chance, an investigative journalist published a major exposé on corruption in urban development, not about Morrison and Wells, but about a different firm that had been using similar tactics. The article mentioned my case as an example of collateral damage when ethical architects get caught in corrupt systems. It was vindicating, proof that I'd been exonerated not just legally, but in the court of professional opinion. But the thing I'd learned in therapy, the thing I'd finally internalized, was that my worth wasn't determined by external validation. I'd rebuilt my career through good work and integrity. Sophia loved me not because of my professional success, but because of who I was when everything else was stripped away. That's the foundation we built on the second time. Not chemistry or timing or cosmic coincidence, but conscious choice. Choosing each other when it was easy and when it was hard. Choosing honesty over protection. Choosing to stay instead of run. 2 years after the gallery, I proposed. Not dramatically, not publicly, just the two of us on a Saturday morning in our apartment. We'd moved in together after a year, drinking coffee and reading the paper. I put down the Times, reached across the table, and took her hand. "Sophia Chen, I've spent 6 years finding you in different cities at the wrong times. I don't want to waste another minute. Will you marry me?" She looked at me, completely serious. "Are you sure? No running this time." "No running," I promised. "I'm exactly where I want to be." She smiled, that real smile, the bookstore smile, the one that had haunted me for half a decade. Then yes, obviously yes. I pulled out a ring I'd been carrying for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. Simple platinum band with a small emerald. She cried. I cried. We called our families and friends and spent the rest of the day celebrating the quiet miracle of getting it right. We got married 8 months later in a small ceremony in Portland, her hometown, the city where we'd had that one perfect evening years ago. Lucas was my best man, Sophia's sister was her maid of honor, her mother cried through the entire ceremony. My father made a speech about patience and persistence and trusting that the right people find each other eventually. Catherine Pierce attended and gave us a generous check with a note for finally getting the timing right. We honeymooned in Italy, spent 2 weeks eating obscene amounts of pasta and exploring architectural wonders and laughing, getting hopelessly lost in Venice. On our last night, sitting on our hotel balcony overlooking the Grand Canal, Sophia asked, "Do you ever think about how many times we almost missed each other?" "Constantly," I admitted. Boston, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, all the ways it could have gone differently. "What if I dated someone else in New York? What if you'd stayed in Chicago? Then maybe we would have found each other in another city, at another wrong time, until we finally got it right." She leaned into me, her head on my shoulder. "I like the version where we stopped missing each other." "Me too," I said. And I meant it. We built a life together in Brooklyn. Sophia continued her work with the foundation. I took on projects that mattered: affordable housing, community centers, schools. We collaborated sometimes, her strategic mind and my design instincts still the perfect combination. We bought a brownstone in Park Slope, spent a year renovating it together, argued about paint colors and floor plans and whether to keep the original molding. She won most of those arguments. We traveled, back to all the cities where we'd missed each other, rewriting those memories. Boston, where we visited that bookstore, still there, still selling poetry. Chicago, where we stayed at the same hotel and laughed about how oblivious we'd been. Seattle, where we walked through Pike Place Market and bought dahlias. We built traditions. Saturday morning coffee and newspapers, Sunday dinners with friends, annual trips to Portland to visit her family. On our second anniversary, Sophia told me she was pregnant. We had a daughter 9 months later, named her Catherine May Reeves, after the woman who'd given me a second chance and Sophia's grandmother who'd emigrated from Taiwan with nothing but courage and hope. Watching Sophia with our daughter, patient, fierce, endlessly loving, I understood what all those years of missing each other had been for. We needed to become the people who could choose each other completely, who could build something lasting not because the timing was perfect, but because we'd learned how to stay. I still think about timing sometimes, how fragile it all was, how easily we could have missed each other permanently. One different choice in Boston, in Chicago, in any of those cities, and we'd be strangers, living parallel lives, never knowing what we'd lost. But we didn't miss each other, in the end. We kept brushing past each other through different cities and different relationships, never quite single at the same moment, until the universe, or fate, or cosmic coincidence, or whatever you want to call it, finally aligned. And when it did, we were ready, scarred and wiser and brave enough to choose the hard, beautiful work of actually being together. Some people believe in love at first sight. I believe in love that takes 6 years, 4 cities, and a dozen missed chances to finally get right. I believe in timing that's terrible until suddenly it's perfect. I believe in second chances and the quiet courage of staying. And I know, that Sophia Chen and I were always going to find each other. We just had to become the people who deserved what we found. Thank you for listening to our story. I know it was a long one, but some stories need time to unfold properly, kind of like the 6 years Sophia and I spent finding our way to each other. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever missed someone at the wrong time or wondered about second chances, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to Modern Love Diaries. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Until next time.